So those are, you know, when you see Toledo, Akron, Youngstown, Dayton, that means that that funding must be utilized in those urbanized areas. And so by separating this out, you know, we make sure people understand where they fall and what the amount of funding that might be available to them. When it comes to state funding, we have $2.5 million available. And this is not broken down because this funding can actually be applied to any of these areas. And again, as I'll mention later in the presentation, you are not requesting that state funding. That really is funding that we have in our back pocket to leverage that federal funding further, or if we have some project requests that are better suited for the criteria of state funding, we will apply it to that instead. So, you know, you don't really have to worry about, okay, should I go for federal? Should I go for state? That's no longer your concern. You just need to say exactly what you need, and then we will make sure that you get the funding that's most appropriate. So I want to first explain how you'll access the application. The application can be accessed two ways. So you will receive an email following this workshop that has the link to the application. And the application does require a password because the application will also be published on our transit webpage, which I've included here. And this presentation will be a PDF, so that is a clickable link. So if you don't have this web page bookmarked on your browser, you can open this presentation once it's distributed and click that link. And I would highly recommend bookmarking this page because this is where we are going to be communicating a lot of our application information. So because this form will be hosted on a public site, we have put on a password so that only people who are screened to apply can apply. So that password will be distributed in the email with the link to the application. So be looking for that in that email. And you will simply just take that password as it's represented in that email, put it into that box and click continue. And as soon as you do, the form will be viewable. So just a few considerations before you start. So one application will be submitted for each applicant for all projects being requested. There is one exception to this rule, and it is very rare, but nonetheless, we definitely want to make note of it. So the only exception to this is if you are an applicant who has projects that will take place in a rural and urban area. So here's an example. And I know for a fact that this entity does have this situation. That's why I am spotlighting them here. Bittersweet Farms has a location in rural Geauga County and a location in urbanized Toledo area. And so for this example, if they were seeking projects for their Geauga location and projects for their Toledo location, they would need to submit two separate applications. The reason being is ODOT has very strict guidelines for our funding in terms of, as you saw in the available funding screen, we have dedicated funding for rural areas and dedicated funding for urban areas. So while you no longer have to worry about that when you're submitting your request, we need the request to come in a format that makes it easy for us to know, okay, this is a rural area, this is an urban area, and when you're combining the two together in one application, it can get really convoluted. You know, what supporting documentation goes with the rural and what goes with the urban, and it just would make things much more complicated than they need to be. So if you find yourself in one of those unique situations where you have locations in rural and urban areas, please submit two separate applications. And if you are someone who maybe you're unsure, just reach out and explain your scenario, and we are happy to clarify for you if you are a one application entity or multiple application entity. So another thing to consider before you get started in the application is there is some limitations to FormStack. First and foremost, applicants cannot save attachments. So we have run into this in the past where we have the save and resume feature, which allows you to save your progress on your application. FormStack will send you a link, and then you follow that link to access your application at a later date and pick up where you left off. What we have found is as people were going through forms, if they ran across an attachment, they would go ahead and upload it. They would click save and resume. When they came back to their application, they found that the attachment was no longer there. So because of that, we don't want people wasting time and effort, obviously. We have an actual attachments section of the application. It is located at the very end of the application. So you will go through, you will complete all of your fields of your application, and then at the very end, right before you're ready to submit, you can just upload all your attachments at once. They're all located in one central area, so you're not combing through the application trying to find the filed upload fields, and that hopefully will kind of mitigate this limitation on your end and make it easier for you to strategically upload your attachments. On the topic of the save and resume feature, while incredibly rare, there have been cases where information has been lost. So someone has been working on a form, they select to save and resume. When they go back to the form, all of their progress wasn't saved. That is, I'm sure, a very defeating feeling. We don't hear of it very often at all, but we have had it. So, you know, it's up to you, but an option is if you have a very detailed portion of your application or a long narrative that you wouldn't want to retype, it might be a good idea to have maybe a Word document where you have this saved also, so that way if anything were to happen where it did not accurately save your progress, you could just copy and paste it right back in and hopefully limit that inconvenience on your end. I'm not saying that this would happen to you, so again, it's your choice how kind of you know, cautious you want to be, but I would recommend for any of those really detailed responses, you have them backed up somewhere. Through the save and resume link, multiple people can access the application. So in some cases, you might have, you know, a financial staff member who needs to complete some information for the budget in the application, or, you know, you might have someone who works with the vehicles who needs to provide some vehicle information. The save and resume feature allows you to share that link with other staff members so that they can access it, complete their portion, save it, and you know, you can pick up where they left off. However, you know, that comes with a disclaimer that you want to make sure that that approach is coordinated because, you know, if multiple people are accessing the application, you're at a higher risk of overwriting information or, you know, messing with the way it's saving. So FormStack, I do believe, has some safety mechanisms where if it registers that someone else is accessing that link, it does give you a warning that you cannot access the application. However, you know, there are technical glitches. There are situations where maybe some of those safety mechanisms don't work. So it's always good just to prepare for those scenarios and have an internal policy for who will access the application when. Finally, there should always be a confirmation email upon submission. So in the application, and I will talk about this, there will be a program contact that you have to fill out. That is the individual who will receive the confirmation email that the submission has been successful. So you should get, upon submission, you should get an email from FormStack that has your submission data. So it says, thank you for your submission, and then it has all of the data that you submitted. If you submit that and you don't see it, you know, within 10 minutes or so, please reach out to us. Do not assume, oh, I just didn't get the email. You should always get an email. We can look into it for you and see if it is showing on our side or not. We definitely don't want there to be assumptions that we have information we don't. We go through, we make project selections, you're not listed, you're like, hey, why didn't I get funded? And we said we never got an application. And this whole time you thought we had it, right? So it should always, always be a confirmation email. So the other thing to note is, as I mentioned, we will be using our transit funding page to communicate important information about the application. So please bookmark it. One of those sections will be the related document section. So in this section is where we will put the ODOT templates and required forms. So previously in Black Hat, you would have the forms would all be listed. You would just download them, complete them, and re-upload them. Through the FormStack application, we don't store the templates in the form itself, so we are storing them here in this section. And we will denote to you in the application if the attachment is an ODOT template, which I will show you an example of that so you know what to look for. If you see that an attachment is an ODOT template, this is where you will come to access it. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get into the required information for the application. So as I just mentioned, there will be some required information in the application, and this is how you will know that it's required. So a required field will have a red asterisk after the field name. So if you see a red asterisk, that means that that field must have data in it before FormStack will allow you to submit the application. Majority, I would say 98% of the fields in our application are required. So, you know, more than likely if you see a field, it's going to have a red asterisk. And then as I was just talking about the ODOT templates, so this is just an example of the vehicle projects attachment section. So you can see the cost worksheets are provided by ODOT for you to complete. So in that supporting text under the choose file button, you see ODOT template. So if you see ODOT template, that means, okay, I need to go to the related document section on the website, and that is where I will find that attachment. And the attachment on the website will match the name of the attachment field. So that, you know, that takes the guesswork out of it for you on, is this the one? It will be a one-to-one so that you will know, have confidence that you have the right thing. If you do not see ODOT template there under choose file, that means that that is a locally produced and provided attachment. So for example, your coordinated plan, right? Any support letters, those are not obviously things provided by ODOT for you to complete. Those are things that you need to have available to attach for our consideration. So these are the general application sections that you will see as you're going through your application. So first up, we ask for applicant information. This is a really important section because the application, given the amount of information and the types of applicants that are applying, it is logic driven, meaning that certain fields appear based on information you submit. So if you're not a public transit system, for example, you're going to see a completely different project listing than you would if you were a public transit, because there's different eligibility when it comes to those organization types. If you select projects like vehicles, operating, capitalized maintenance, you are only going to see project sections in your application related to those 3 projects.